This Dodge Viper was listed as is and sold at an auction amongst cars with some pretty severe issues. But at a first glance, it looks darn good, except for the cheesy plastic wing drilled into the rear deck, and the red stickers placed on the fenders and wheels, and the heavy crusty buildup that I found inside its cooling system. Okay, so the last thing I discovered after I bought it, but right before I bought it, it started strong with a jump, and it seemed to idle fine, and it went into gear and drove for a few hundred feet before it started overheating. Okay, this is why these cars are sold like this, and with a very hefty discount. And while we'll talk specific numbers in a moment, the main thing that has me concerned right now is that like half of the other cars I looked at in this same lot had some sort of catastrophic engine damage because of overheating. On these other cars, well, they're basically disposable, but on a second-gen Viper, these have become really desirable and can be worth quite a lot. Either way, the Viper is loaded with old school tech, so I'm hopeful we can fix it. It's just a matter of how much it will cost to fix it. This thing's not coming off the trailer until we can get down to the bottom of that overheating situation. 9 out of 10 of these auction cars that I get that overheat, especially as quickly as this Viper did, have blown head gaskets. So I'm really hoping that's not what we find here, but we can do a few simple checks to see what's going on. We'll just start with the engine oil here. And that is clean. That is way too clean, like someone just did that. And I hate seeing clean engine oil because usually it means that, well, the car had a problem and they're hiding that problem by just switching the oil out. So that's not telling us much, at least not right now. What the hell is going on with this coolant cap here? All right, this took a little bit of figuring out, but here we go. And now we just got to get a good look at that coolant. That's a problem. There is, in fact, no coolant. That would make sense that the car would overheat if it has no coolant. Where are the radiator hoses in this thing? Got one down here, it looks like. It's got like it's got a tube in it to, you know, keep its structure, so I can't really squeeze that one. Here's the upper one. Oh, that is completely empty. I hear a little bit of stuff moving around in there, but this system is really, really empty. This right here, I'm now noticing, this looks like a aftermarket radiator. And these Vipers were known to overheat, but like overheat just sitting in traffic, not just under normal conditions, like driving out of an auction at 5 miles an hour. So we're gonna start off with our trusty old pressure testing kit here. Looks like one of these caps will do it, probably the bigger one. This is one of the most simplest and straightforward ways to test your cooling system. You get one of these caps that fits the stock reservoir, and I think this is the right one. Yeah, there we go. Just got to get it on there tight. And you take the pump hose and just slip it over. And we're going to want to pump this up to about 1 bar pressure here towards the high side of the green area. All right. You can see we're not building any sort of pressure, well, any meaningful pressure at all. That probably means that there is a leak and the air is going right where that leak is. And oh, we got good news. I hear water and I can actually see a little bit of water. Let's see that here. Let's come over here. Where is that? Let's see if we get under the car. It's coming out from under there. Oh yeah, there we go. Well, that's good too. That means that there was a little bit of coolant, at least in the system. When we were running the car, it wasn't completely empty. So these are all much better signs than just a car that overheats very quickly. This upper radiator hose looks brand new. It's got aftermarket clamps on it, so it's been replaced at one time. The lower hose, it looks in fine shape, but it's nowhere near where our drips are coming from. The drips are like right the underside of this pump. I'm just trying to get around the belt here in this tight engine bay. Oh yeah, it's real damp right on the engine itself, right underneath the pump. The way that these things work is that there's a weep hole in all of these pumps. When the seals fail internally, well, it basically lets you know it's time to replace your pump because it just dumps all the coolant out of them. So hopefully our problem is just an old water pump, but to make sure that nobody overheated this engine to the point where it did real damage, there's one last real quick test that we can do. This is our block tester, and we'll just start by taking this piece here and sticking it in the overflow tank. Now I'll just pour in a tiny bit of our test solution here and start the engine. Since this car overheats so quickly, I anticipate we'll have test results in just a few seconds here. The way this test works is really simple. The fluid inside of the chamber here reacts to combustion gases. So if there was a breach in the head gasket or a cracked block or head, basically the exhaust would make its way past that into our cooling system. If that were to happen, this fluid will turn yellow in color, but if you notice, it actually seems like it's turning more blue. This fluid does react both ways, and so far this is a great sign. Now in just a minute or two, this thing should be up to temperature and our thermostat will open all the way up and we can confirm our current test results. But while we're waiting, let me tell you how Revenued helped me buy this Viper. Revenued is a business card and flex line. It's what helps me get the more exotic cars at the auction. When the deals show up, you gotta act quick. In less time than it takes this Viper to overheat, you can apply. And your business could have a funding decision in as little as 1 hour with up to $500,000 in working capital. Now with the Viper warmed up and the fluid solid blue, this is a fantastic sign that we've got a healthy engine. Just like this test, Revenued gives you instant clarity with no origination fees, no draw fees, and no maintenance fees eating away at your capital. Now through all the research I've done, it seems like the lowest price used second-gen Viper on the market right now is in the $40,000 range. I paid 30% less than that, and I was able to do so quickly because of my Revenued Flex line. If we're able to fix this thing on a budget, and I think we can, there's a decent profit to be made here. So check out what Revenued can do for your business down at the link in the description box. They're rated excellent on Trustpilot with several hundred positive reviews, and there's no credit checks since approvals are based on your business revenue and not your personal credit. So hit that link down in the description box and learn more about Revenued. And in case you're wondering what this would end up looking like if our results were bad, here, if I just breathe into it, watch. Since we exhale carbon dioxide, it'll actually turn this fluid because carbon dioxide is exactly what's in those combustion gases that reacts with this test fluid. So I just pulled the upper radiator hose off, and do you see all that inside? That is not good looking. Although, again, touching it, it just feels like corrosion. This is awfully reminiscent of what head gasket sealer looks like, and it tends to just stick to everything. But see how I'm kind of just flaking it off with my fingernail? That could just be buildup and corrosion from there not being enough coolant in the system and it just sitting for a long time. We're going to really hope that's what that is. And when we actually get the water pump off the motor, if head gasket sealer was used, I think we'd see a ton of buildup on the impeller and all the internals of the water pump. So let me go ahead and try and get this thing out of here. It's going to be a little bit of a tight job, but hopefully we can get it, and we'll give us a little bit more insight as to what's going on. Now this V10 Viper motor was based off of Dodge's V10 truck motors, so the layout's really simple and you can get to all the accessories with ease, except for this big brace that runs right in front of the engine. Once I loosen all the water pump bolts, the water pump itself won't just pull out of place without also removing an idler and tensioner pulley. With those out of the way, you can get access to hoses that are connected to the lower part of the water pump and then get it up and out of the car. And even though this is really old and crusty, the inside of it isn't as bad as I thought it could be. If this was head gasket sealer, I think you'd see it jammed up in all the fins of the plastic impeller here, but it's actually pretty clean. And at first I assumed that it was just leaking out of its weep hole, but when you take a look at the baked on paper gasket around this water pump housing, I'm betting that was the failure point. And realistically, we could go and just get a new gasket, clean everything up, and re-seal this car. It would probably work. But these plastic impellers are known to fail over time. Really, any water pump that uses a plastic impeller over time will get brittle, it'll crack, and then it will just stop circulating water. It's not worth the trouble to reinstall everything without upgrading this first. And I say upgrade because nobody makes a Gen 2 Viper water pump anymore. It's an obsolete part. If you can find one, they're well over $1,000. And again, they come with this plastic impeller. So there's a couple guys out there that will actually rebuild these pumps with a billet steel impeller. So I shipped this one away to one of those services, and in the meantime, we'll fix up the rest of our cooling system. Now, since these cars ran hot straight from the factory, a very common upgrade is a thermostat swap. They make thermostats that open about 20 degrees cooler than factory. They're readily available, and they only cost about 20 bucks at the auto parts store. Now I went and grabbed one of these and I looked all over for the thermostat housing, and it's not visible on the front of the engine. That's because it's hidden underneath the intake manifold. On this generation Viper, it's big It's chunky and it's solid metal. But it's not all that hard to remove. There's 10 wiring pigtails up top for each ignition coil and a few dozen bolts holding it in place. And while this seems like a lot of work for a simple part, you can actually admire how basic these cars were back in the day. Each wiring plug has no push clip. They just insert, they snap into place with a thick, chunky piece of plastic that's clearly stood the test of time. I wished all the European cars I worked on used this same style plug. Anyway, when we lift the intake manifold up, of course, we're going to destroy the paper gaskets that sit in between it and the cylinder heads. And then we've got access to the 3 bolts holding on the thermostat housing. And out of all the paper gaskets, this one is the worst. It is completely baked on the top of the engine and also the housing itself. And so there was quite a bit of cleaning and scraping to do before I reassembled this. But it was well worth the efforts, because if you look at our original thermostat gasket, it's old, it's brittle, it's cracked all over, and this part has also clearly reached the end of its lifespan. Now, the minor headache came when we went to reassemble all this. These aftermarket paper gaskets were so thin, the second the top of the intake manifold touched them, it tore one of the corners where it was being held in place, and so it was a total balancing act trying to hold this gasket in place while we went and lowered it back down in the car, and it turned into an impossible job. Eventually, our new paper gaskets became kinked and torn everywhere before we reassembled it, and I'd be darned if I bought a second set of these flimsy paper gaskets. I wanted something better, but this second gen car is so strange to shop parts for. If you search parts for the first generation Vipers, there are companies that make them. Even a replacement water pump exists. And the same thing for the third generation Vipers. But this second gen, there are very limited parts. Now, what I noticed is that the third generation Vipers intake gaskets look very similar, but it is a bigger displacement motor, so they could be a different size. These were, again, readily available at the local auto parts store. I gave them a shot, and it turns out they fit, and they are so much better quality than the old ones. I imagine they'll last a very long time. With all the work finished on the top part of this motor, we can finally install our refresh water pump. This took about 3 weeks' time to get back, and around $400. But take a look at the new billet impeller. There are so many more vanes inside this thing. It should help circulate more water. This will keep the car running cooler, more consistently. This isn't just a reliability upgrade, it's a performance upgrade too. Probably looks about the same to you, but we have every single clamp running to all the coolant inlets, outlets, tanks, reservoirs, engines, and everything. This car is a major headache to work on underneath this hood. It took this assortment of vice grips and hose clamps. Make sure you got that remote guy right there. You'll never be able to begin or finish this job. And it's mainly because of that front reinforcement bar that runs across the engine right in front of things. It's a headache. But at this point, the only thing this car needs to actually start over, run, and see if we fixed our problems is a little bit of coolant. But coolant is expensive, so we will be filling this Viper back up with hose water. Now, hose water might sound like a bad idea, and over time it's sure to cause buildup like we found in this car's cooling system, but it couldn't have been more perfect in this case, because just a few seconds after filling our tank with the water, I heard and saw the leak come right back, pretty much in the same spot it was before. One of the first cars I attempted repairing myself was a Mercedes with a leaky radiator, and after replacing the radiator, I put in a gallon of that special blue coolant, and upon its first startup, one flaky hose clamp let loose, and I lost all that brand new blue coolant. Back then it felt like an expensive mistake, but that $30 in coolant turned into a cheap lesson that always stuck with me, and after any sort of extensive cooling system repair, I always fill everything with water first to make sure it will hold. This Viper has become the ultimate reminder that patience pays off. Besides waiting for the parts to be rebuilt and new gaskets to be made, the whole reason our water pump was just leaking after doing all the repairs is because the mating surface between the pump itself and the actual engine was not perfect. I noticed on the bottom edge of the engine, there's a little bit of that baked on gasket left. It's just one of the annoying things you deal with the paper gasket. I obviously wasn't patient enough when I went and reassembled everything. So I've done it twice. And the second time, I used a little bit of water pump sealer on it, which, from what I understand, will really help assure the paper gasket stay in place and stay sealed. We are ready to refill this with the hose, and we're going to watch closely to see if there are any drips. You will see the support brace down there is completely dry. I don't hear any dripping. I think we're finally good. The reservoir is finally holding some water, which is great, but to double check and confirm that that water is going to stay put when we go on a test drive, we'll go ahead and pressure test it again. Now, in a perfect world, we love to see the pressure that we built on this gauge hold, but again, I don't trust these tools 100% because they're not made specifically for this car, but I don't see any leaks there. With our inspection showing no leaks while we put the car under pressure, we should be ready for test drive. Now, while the car's running, we'll top off the cooling system to make sure it gets to capacity. But before we start it up, I'm just going to add some of this radiator flush. That way, it breaks up any of that corrosion that we saw and that we couldn't see that's left over in the system. And I'm planning on leaving this flush in for a few days and several heat cycles, just so everything gets real clean before we fill the system with coolant. Our fans are running. Everything is looking great so far. Look at this beautiful thing. I've had this car running straight for 15 minutes. We'll tell you, the air conditioning is hotter than heck. So we can actually drive it and give it a little bit more gas this time, see how she does. Wow. I can see why people like these. Whoa. The throttle response is unbelievable. I'm just in first gear. I'm just on my driveway in first gear. And well, we need a lot more of an open road to get this thing going. We need the top off too to get the full experience, but go down to second gear, open it. Ooh. Oh yeah, it works. The brakes are a little, you know, they feel like they're right out of the Dodge Caravan. It could get an upgrade in the brake department, but in the cooling department, I tell you what, I think it's darn perfect. All right, we got to talk the numbers on this Viper. It's a 2000 model year. It's got 55,000 miles on the clock, which is a bit higher than average, but I only paid right around $30,000 for it at the auction. I think the final bid was like 30. Probably paid another $500 or $600 in auction fees. The water pump upgrade service, that was $400, and I probably spent about $150 in gaskets. Of course, we got to throw some coolant at it. Figure we've got right around $31,000 into this Viper, and the cheapest second-gen Vipers that I found were in the mid-40s, $45,000, $46,000, and those were a lot older. Those were like 96 model years. The Viper guys will know whether that really messes with the values. I gotta imagine this is a $40,000 car all day long. Now, when the Vipers came out in the early 90s, it was an instant icon. Nothing looked like this, with insanely huge displacement, a 6-speed transmission. Of course, the performance figures were decent, but they were a bit of a chore to live with, and that's because the first generation cars had those thin plastic windows, a canvas top that you would zip up, and while the second gen car addressed all those problems while providing better performance figures, better handling, and I think that's why these cars hold their value so much better. The first gen Vipers have always been stuck in that like $30,000 to $45,000 range. If you have a second gen Viper GTS, which is the fixed roof version of this car, they sell north of $100,000 to this day, because you get those iconic original Viper looks, but without the compromise of owning a first-gen Viper. This specific trim is called the RT10. It's the more common of the Gen 2 Vipers, and it basically is the removable top version. That hard top comes off, and I think new from the dealer, you would have also got a soft top with this car. Unfortunately, my car did not have it in the trunk. For the most part, everything looks stock on it, except for the cheesy wing on the back and these wheels. These are not original Gen 2 Viper wheels, but the good thing is that they appear to be
Viper ACR wheels off of what I think is a Gen 4 Viper. So I imagine there's still some good value in these wheels, and if you wanted to swap back to a set of period correct ones, it probably wouldn't cost you much, if anything, by the time you're done trading them up.
So if you're like me and think that $31,000 is super cheap for this Viper, be sure to hit that like button. If you think we spent a little too much, let me know why down in the comments. I hope you learned something from this one. If you did, please consider subscribing, as I plan to do a bit of a deeper dive into this Viper and take it on a longer open road test, and we'll fix it all along the way. Now I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today. I'll catch you very soon.